We also have Shruti Rajkumar, who is the Film Facilitations Officer Head. Please come on stage, Shruti. We have Anupam Sharma. He's the producer, director of an Australian film, India Film Council, and the director of Bollywood Down Under, a fantastic film I had the privilege of watching in Sydney before I went to South by Southwest. Most importantly, Nalin, writer, director, producer of The Last Film Show. Let's have you up on stage. And Alastair Clark, who is a producer. Please have you on stage as well. Cary, I will let you take this brilliant panel over.
I thought we could see some clips of the, we could see some clips first of all to see what some co-productions that have taken place. So could we run some clips?
Stop the car! This is why I didn't want you here.
And this is exactly why I didn't want Eva here.
બધું ખતમ થઈ ગયું છેલ્લો શો હતો છેલ્લો શો
Once upon a time, in a land rich with thousands of years of stories, moving images arrived and gradually became another religion. A way of life for millions hungry for escape. Music, drama, song. Thriving on the fanatic love of millions, I became a universal language for India. During my global rise, I fell in love with this land down under, Australia.
India's Bollywood is moving in.
A little bit of Bollywood, Canberra style.
The biggest Indian movie in Australia.
Like all love stories, it wasn't easy.
We weren't quite sure how to deal with them.
Spot boys and umbrella boys.
Sorry, can I start again?
No, you can't. Can we just close the camera just for a sec?
But it was worth every moment. This is that story. My story. I am Bollywood.
There's a great range of clips there. So just to recap on the purpose of the event, it's really to kind of explore the idea of international co-productions, and we've got some great speakers here from very different worlds. And And also it's to give an opportunity for Indian filmmakers especially to understand what are the possibilities for international co-production. So we're going to explore that very quickly, but I would like to ask our speakers to introduce themselves one by one in terms of their key areas of knowledge, and particularly the filmmakers talk about their particular recent, very quickly about their recent co-productions, international co-productions as we go along. And then we'll go into some questions after that. And then if we've got time, we'd like to open it to the floor and ask some questions from the audience. Great. Would you, Nirja? Is it working?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shruti Rajkumar, and I'm heading the Film Facilitation Office. We have a team in Delhi, we have a team in Bombay, and the main objective of what we do is help Indian filmmakers, Indian co-producers, navigate the entire process of, submitting, getting permissions. And the biggest part of what we do is essentially the incentives that we offer filmmakers. So we guide them in terms of, how to navigate that entire process, getting your co-production certificates. So the entire process, right, from application to final disbursement, that is essentially what we do and how we support filmmakers. My background itself, so I come from a production background. I used to be a producer in my previous avatar. So this is, sort of everything coming together. And yeah, that's pretty much what the Film Facilitation Office does.
That's great, thank you.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Anupam Sharma. I'm a filmmaker based out of Sydney. We've been making films with India, about India for the last 25 years. I also happen to chair the Australia-India Film Council, which was formed during the COVID. And at the moment, I'm extremely happy because we had two of the biggest gifts to anyone working between Australia and India. The Indian government increased its grants to 40%, and day before yesterday, Australia-India co-production treaty became a reality. So I'm very happy because I'm in that wonderful gap of many filmmakers like me who are not Indian enough for India anymore, but they're not Australian enough for Australia yet. So these grants from both the countries will make it a very less risky proposition for our investors to invest in shared stories.
Hi, my name is Nalin. I'm mainly a writer-director who was forced to become producer. So I had no choice because there were days when I couldn't find producers, so I had to learn and find all kind of ways and means to finance my films. And that sort of happened to be one of the way was co-production, trying to look for money outside India, because the kind of theme I was trying to do, there was absolutely no room in a commercial atmosphere which exists in India. There was just absolutely no fund available unless you had a top star in the film from Bollywood. So that's where my journey started with my first film, and it took many, many years. And I have co-produced mainly a lot with Europe and also with New Zealand. And yeah, we'll talk about more a little later.
Morning. I'm Al Clark. I'm a producer from the UK, here as part of the BFI delegation. Thank you, National Lottery. I didn't get a really, really loud trailer playing there, so that doesn't matter because you can go and see our film at noon at IFFI called A House in Jerusalem. So straight after here, you can leg it over there with me in a taxi. So that was a UK, Palestine, Germany, Netherlands co-production, official co-production, first ever UK Palestine official treaty co-production. But I shot a feature here in Mumbai earlier this year, which is a fully British film. It's not a treaty co-production, fully British, but we accessed the Indian filming incentive at the old cap level, an old percentage. So we would have got more money now, but don't worry. That's cool. And we're in post-production on that. And we had a great time, great experience working with a local service company called Suitable Pictures based in Mumbai.
Thank you for that. So there's been relatively few international co-productions with India when you look at it. As an exhibitor myself and a filmmaker, actually seeing films coming from India. There's a few, like the obvious ones are The Lunchbox, Samsara, obviously by Nalin, Hotel Salvation, The Song of Scorpions, Parched, films like that that have really got to a UK or international worldwide audience. Obviously, co-productions are challenging because you're working across different countries with different expectations. Many Indian filmmakers think that it's a great idea to get money from abroad if you can't get it in at home. But I wondered why, particularly the filmmakers, were keen to look. Why did they go explore co-productions in the first place? Clearly, it was not just for the money, and the whole idea of partnerships abroad. The idea of universal stories that could travel from not just out in India but around the world, specificities between, say, Australia and South Asia, particularly India. So just some ideas around why you engage with co-productions.
Sure. I mean, one of the things which especially young filmmakers should really, really, really care about is that co-productions the term co-production is the end of a three-step process. The first and the most important thing is a story that travels, a story which is a shared story. That has to be the strong beating heart. On top of that beating heart is the collaboration. Who are you collaborating with creatively? And then comes co-production, reducing the risks for investors, for the collaborative journey you have started, for the shared story. We are very lucky in India because most of the countries around the world, especially Australia, the Indian diaspora is the second biggest diaspora after the Britishers. British people have got big Indian diaspora, which means there are organic stories which travel, which appeal. So yeah, I mean, that's what we look for co-productions. For us, the story has to travel. You cannot... you have to get into a marriage and it cannot be a one-night stand, let's grab the money and go out, because that's never going to work kind of thing. You have to think long-term marriage plans. And co-productions are hard, but if you take the shared stories and stories that travel as your foundation, everything else becomes easier.
I think it's very true. I mean, for me, the co-production is never about money. It's always about the producer I want to work with, because it's going to be maybe a couple of years long marriage, which you start with signing a divorce paper. So it's like you are working on exit clause. What if this thing doesn't work out? What if you don't find the money? So it gets really complicated. So you really want a human being who is going to fall in love with your story and understand the universal value it carries and be a support system in any which way possible. Now, very often, especially in Europe, what happens is that the producers only commit to you, especially to Indian project, if they find money in their own country from public funding system. If they don't find, it gets really complicated. There have been many projects in India, I'm sure many of you know, which didn't find, where co-producer came on board, but they didn't get the government funding in their own country. So since 10 years, I changed the sort of complete strategy for my movies, and I only work with producer who's willing to bring in equity. I said, like, okay, we both can sit together and do some kind of a projection, how much film will sell for, but you have to commit, equity funding. If you get public funding, great. But, if not, because also the second thing is it takes way too long to apply for all those funds. There are many, time consuming. It could take 8 months to a year. And after, if reply is no, you don't have fund to continue. So in order to sort of create a process fast, this is something I was able to insist a little bit because a couple of my previous films did good record in terms of selling. So I said, okay, I can push the envelope and say, okay, now you put the money down and we do co-production. We bring in equity from India. Because in India, mainly the investment will be cash, So I think that's probably, I don't know if it's a formula, but that's one way to get quicker approach to get production in greenlit.
Great, thank you for that, Pan. So, Al, in terms of working with India for the first time, what drew you to the idea of international co-production with India?
Well, on Sister Midnight, it was a no-brainer to shoot in India because the film's set in India. It's set in Mumbai completely. It's in Hindi. It's just the writer-director is Indian, although he lives in the UK, so it always was going to be shot in India. We couldn't have done it anywhere else. I mean, I should say when you're doing a co-production, because that wasn't an official treaty co-production, doing a treaty co-production is, you shouldn't enter it lightly, because it's really complicated, let's be honest, and it's expensive. To do all the legals, it is expensive, time-consuming, and there's going to be a lot more international travel involved. There's going to be increased cost. Don't just do it as a source of money. It has to be the right fit for your film. It has to make sense creatively. It's not, it is about accessing money, but it shouldn't be the sole reason, because, as I say, it's expensive. And from experience on our four-way co-production, some of the partners weren't necessarily used to the legal system in the UK and how way more pernickety it is than maybe some other countries. So the inter-party agreement that all partners have to sign up to was quite a challenging process, let's say. And you're relying, as a producer in one country, you're delivering to, in our case, the BFI, but you're also reliant on all of the other partners doing their deliveries to all of their funders, and you're waiting on that, and they might have different time scales, they might have different delivery deadlines, which might affect yours. So there's a bigger picture to look at.
But, just a couple of quick things I'd like to pick up, because it's very important. You rightly said, if it's a genuine collaboration, money is your first worry but your last problem. You will have so many other things coming in. And particularly what Pan said, I had a youngster who came into me, and you cannot make a film in a co-production treaty, which is like a paper tiger, where every money is coming from subsidy, like you said. So you have to have some real cash on board. And as everyone will tell you, it's like, when you sign a contract, be very particular who has the creative veto, who has a financial veto. And taking that marriage analogy forward, it's make sure you have a really tight prenup before you get into the wedding.
Yes, I think the creative, I have done now co-production with Italy, France, Germany, Japan, US, and New Zealand. The understanding of culture where your producer is coming from is very important, because I'm trying to make a very local story. I must find a way and means that he understands that he feels what I'm doing is a universal. And very often, of course, they have a say in it, because you are not just treating them as financier or producer, so you have to involve them in the creative process. So often things are challenging. Like, for example, in one of the movie, when we did the sort of first edit screening in Germany for German co-producer, they said, oh, the love scenes are too long, let's cut it out, because they stop the story, we should make it shorter, would you agree to that? I said, okay, my editor, we think about it. Then we have also co-production with France. We go and screen the same cut with the French co-producer, and they say, we love the love scene, they should be long, So now that's a thing, where you need to get everyone on one table and say, when there's a multiple country involved in co-production, that they creatively, financially, they align with the vision of the film you are making. That's a big challenge, and that's where I think that choosing a right partner, the producer, is a key thing before starting any production.
Just to add to that, I'm talking about money, which is a big decision maker when, to get your film finally kind of rolled out. India offers the co-production incentives, which you're aware of, which we have agreements with 16 countries. And a big part of that is we allow for 50% dispersal before you complete your shoot. And that, I think, makes that decision to get into a co-production partnership that much easier. And the objective is we want to enable good stories, and I think it puts Indian filmmakers also in a position of power now. And that 50% dispersal will definitely help you to pump it right back into the production. So when you're looking at the bigger picture in terms of what the cost of production is, that is something that will definitely help you, in making the decision forward. Absolutely. As well. So 30% is what the incentives are at right now for official co-productions.
No, they are really welcome changes. I mean, I really think that they're introduced since a couple of years now, and I think it would really help. And whatever I'm preparing now, that's being woven into the production finance plan. Yeah.
And we're really happy to hear that. I also heard, there was a bit of concern in terms of, what are the timelines involved, because that's, again, you mentioned that, you're not sure in terms of, when is that going to come in. So we have this 90-day period that we take very seriously, and we work backwards, keeping that in mind. We have, about 11 projects which are in different stages of dispersal. So I believe, keeping all of that in mind, for all, future filmmakers also would help you sort of plan in the future for the upcoming projects.
Well, the 50% upfront is a very welcome change.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't get that. That wasn't a rule then. So we're waiting for it all on the back. And we couldn't borrow against it like we would in the UK with UK tax credit because it wasn't tried and tested. I mean, UK, we just go to a debt lender and they lend against it for a premium. But no one would lend against the filming incentive because you hadn't done it yet. No, it hadn't paid out. But now it has. Now it is. Hopefully that will be a reality.
And that's what we look at the other side of the things, with the topic, how accessible are international film funds. So I set up the Australia-India Film Fund, and we did the first film was with Brett Lee on India. When we were looking at co-production stuff and we were looking at collaborations from the other side, we were looking at these important bits. What is the cash flow going to be like? Who's going to be lending it? Will we get 50% up front? Is it reliable? That's another key thing. You go to a place called Timbuktu who's offering you 60%. We ain't going to see it for 2 or 3 years or the government falls. So those are the things, because when film funds invest, that's real hard-earned money by someone. So what India has done over the last week and announced is a huge game changer.
Yes. And we're hoping for some big projects, good stories really to come out of this announcement. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, with the idea of, obviously for filmmakers quite often have to take a loan against bonds and stuff like that. So you don't have bonding system in India, is that right, in terms of?
Not to my knowledge. Again, I'm, yeah.
But obviously getting that cash flow in terms of.
I understand the challenge because you're going to get 100% of that money only once your project is complete.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge amount. So, from a filmmaker's perspective, you've got the auditing process, that's due diligence that you have to go through. So the 50% is our support for filmmakers, especially with co-productions. So, figuring out the remaining financing, I understand the challenge with that.
But there's an interesting difference to that, because correct me if I'm wrong, your balance comes in after the shoot is over in a 90-day period, right?
After the shoot is over, we require an NOC as well.
Okay.
If that's recommended by the officer. Provided all of those comes in, your file gets processed fairly quickly.
So that it may be something for the first ADs and the films to keep in mind in terms of schedule. Because in Australia, we get the producer offset after the final copy of the film is submitted and the process starts. So maybe based on how they cash flow and schedule the stuff, they may not need any lending. And it's just kind of,
So you are required to show the final film? Yeah, it is, yeah. So both can happen in parallel. Because the documentation process itself is fairly exhaustive, but we have to do due diligence. So both processes can happen in parallel. Once you get the NOC, the documentation is all in place. There will be a little bit of back and forth. I can't say that it's completely an easy breezy process. It's important for us to make sure that everything is in order. But it happens again fairly quickly. We have a whole team who sits. We have a committee that sits on the project and really goes through it in detail. And there are producers who are also part of this panel. So am I. I mean, I used to be one back in the day. So we're really on the filmmaker's side to make sure that you get all the support that you need, and that's important.
I think we do speak about co-production, but as a filmmaker and a director and a writer, it's my dream not to do co-production, because I think that India is a rich country with so much of financing available, and there are extremely successful models in Japan, South Korea, whether it's France, they have been not doing co-production, but they have made their movies sellable worldwide. So I think, I do co-production because I can't raise money I need out of India. So, but if there was a way where I could work with one particular producer or a financier or I would ideally make a film and make it more profitable. Because today the films I made, I mean, all the profits are shared between 3 countries. So I'm not getting back that money, and very often, because of the co-production, they insist on an international sales agent. So they take away 25-30% of your commission. So that money is not coming back to India. So it's not coming back to me. So I would say that their, first choice would be, as a filmmaker, that can I have a, not to do co-production, because it is a lot of legal work, is a lot of paperwork, and I've been closely looking at how do the South Koreans do their films, how the Japanese do that, and how they are doing it in even France. And that would be a dream situation, because the moment we do in India a film which has no star, we just start looking for co-production. We start running everywhere in the world. We run to Busan and Cannes and try to look for money. And very often it's very discouraging, disheartening. We lose a lot of time, and the fund is shrinking, by the way. In France, now it's only 100,000 euro, which is not big money. So I would say that with this scheme, the co-production opens up to equity investors. It makes it really interesting now that you don't have to wait for government fund for if you are a European or American co-producer wanting to work in India.
Can we just, I think that segues into the idea of, just for the filmmakers here, to understand the sense of international funds that are available, both private equity and public funding. Pan, you've probably got the most experience in terms of the world. You've got funding from Japan, you've been talking to the New Zealand Film Commission, right through to France. Obviously, you've had a lot of work with France and seeing the changing scenarios in mainland Europe. Could you just give us a bit of sense of the kind of private or public funds you've approached and been successful with, and the timelines that those things take as well?
I think just a few years ago, there was a lot more money with European fund, Euroimage, or France or Germany. But it's now all those funds, because of domestic political, is being driven to German language film, French language film. Everywhere there is that movement. So I don't think there is that much money available. I don't think you can get public funding if your film is not in, let's say, French language, more than 200,000 euro out of maybe 100 from, that is if you're selected. That process can take almost a year. And you need to translate all your documents into French and have under treaty, all the paperwork done. So for so little money, and I don't know whether it's worth, because there's uncertainty that it's not that you're going to get the fund. So what I have done is, and which I would advise, because post-pandemic, and since power of platforms, 2015, everything has changed. I mean, I was this year in Cannes, I'm sure many of you were here. First time I was shocked, everybody was selling, there were no buyers. The market had hardly few buyers, and everybody you meet, I'm selling something. So that change I have never seen before, and within that market, what I try to do is we still try and do some pre-sale, some territory to finance the film, and do co-production by pre-selling film. That way, at least, you have some money coming back from abroad. But I have, at least since I would say about 10 years, I've stopped applying for any kind of public fund.
So, I mean, more than public funds, I agree with Pan, because, there's a long queue. So we found the answer in pretty simple, straightforward dealings. We would approach the investor, and we would say, you've got many, especially Indian investors. Our highest success rate has been with Indian investors, most of whom, especially the independent ones, have lost money or have invested in films which never get completed or which never get released. And I had an argument several years ago with an investor, and I said, what did you look at? And he said, we do it on trust. So, and people tell us that we'll get our money back. So my logic is that if anyone is telling that your returns are guaranteed, they are lying. So what do? With the co-production treaty, with the subsidies, one of the holiest grail we have in Australia is a finance plan. The moment I have a budget loosely locked in, there is a finance plan. Where is what is coming from? And what we do is to our investors, we say, investing in films is risky, but we reduce your risk practically, legally, ethically, and professionally by half. And that's a huge starting point. because all the producer offset we get from Australia is actually an equity for producer which we give away. So so they get first in line. Now, if after 50 or 60% of budget having been secured, I cannot secure 40% of the budget, only equity remaining with 100% equity, then I can't make a film anywhere. So it's always about reducing the risks for investors and accountability. So when we go to them from Australia, they know the film will be complete. They know there will be a transparent accounting. They know there will be a bond company. They know the film will be available in the time frame we have set. And that has been our philosophy. I call it Western body and Indian soul. Making films in Western structure, but with Indian soul, because they have succeeded since 1960s. You pick up any film, only because they reduce risk creatively and commercially.
Thanks for that. And Al,
yeah, well, to fly the flag for the UK for a moment and to answer the question posed on the screen. So the benefit of Indian filmmakers working with the UK through a official treaty co-production, is that if you thus qualify your film as British, which is what the treaty does for you, you are then able to access public funds in the UK. The major one being the fairly new UK Global Screen Fund, which is run by the BFI, but there's other public funds as well, such as Creative Scotland, it's Screen Scotland now, they keep changing the name, Northern Ireland, Wales, and some regional funds in England, although there's not many. So you have to be capable of qualifying as a British through the treaty. But that money is highly sought after. It's not an infinite pot by any means. I mean, it's highly competitive. So, there's an awful lot of filmmakers here that I've met that would like to go for it, but it's going to be competitive because it's accessible to anyone around the world, not just here. But that is, on a financial benefit, the reason to do it with the UK. But it has to make sense. It really has to make sense as a co-production, because as I say, it's an expensive process legally. The legal fees alone rocket when you're doing a co-production.
I just want to, you used qualify. That's really a big trap when you get the money. And I didn't know that earlier. So when you do get co-production under the treaty, if you qualify, then there are point system. So you might have got money from certain country, then you have to spend that money in that country, where post-production might be really expensive, or because you are shooting in India, the movie, and if all you can do is hire, sound mixer or any of the post-production activities. So in the end, sometime at least on 2 films, we had to take money from India to pay. It was not enough. So. But luckily, we had done good pre-sales, so we were able to sort of pay off those things. But I think that's another thing very important, that even under treaty, if you qualify, they all have a point system. So there's a 20-point system. So music composer might have 2 points, editor might have 1, sound recordist 1, European co-producer might have 2 points, and you have to have full 20 points. Otherwise, you will not qualify for the treaty.
And if it helps, the incentives are available also for post-production in India?
That's absolutely, all new scheme in 2 years are fantastic.
And it's fascinating. And you're right, an Indian producer once said, what will I do with a 40% producer rebate or 40% subsidy if my film is costing 50% extra to shoot there? I'm better off not going there.
And it covers VFX, animation, post-production, the entire deal. The minimum spends as spend in India is 1 crore, but the amount that you can claim back remains 30. So that's definitely something to consider.
I think all the new policies and schemes which I'm mainly talking about my experience. I wish it was there when I made my last film show. I would have benefited so much. But next project certainly, and I think all of you who are making film, it's a really great, all the new incentive which is launched are super attractive. Not only by the central government, but even the state, what they are offering is quite exciting, whether it's Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, so many states have many. So I think if you combine all that,
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm doing with my producing partner, that, okay, India has now new kind of a system, and we are trying to make a new kind of financial plan, which we have never made before, where there is no room for applying for public fund or, not even a treaty, just getting an equity partner and saying, okay, come on, you bring money, and we bring money out of India, and we co-produce under this new incentive.
Yeah, and just be in touch with the Film Facilitation Office. The minute there are revisions with state incentives as well, we let you know. And like you mentioned, you can club it all together, and that becomes that much more lucrative for the filmmaker to do that.
And can you just tell us a bit about the collaborations with, say, clubbing up the funding with other regional parts of India, for example, Gujarat or Kerala, etc.?
Sure. So most states have a film policy, but it depends. Like, for instance, certain states allow, the incentives are for only regional films, in which case it doesn't help a foreign filmmaker to avail of those. Some states allow you to club it with the federal incentives and others don't. So that's something to factor in. For instance, Gujarat doesn't allow that. But there are states which have a fantastic film policy, like for instance Madhya Pradesh or even Uttarakhand, which allow you to do that. And at the time of planning, if you're aware, now for instance, I know there are certain states that are looking to also revise that and up their cap as well. So can you imagine what the possibilities are now like? And I know for a fact that, everyone is working on a policy. So the minute there are updates on that front as well, we'll keep filmmakers posted so that you can sort of plan everything keeping that in mind. But the fact that it allows you to club itself is a big deal.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the private equity in other countries, working with private, in Australia, for example, Anupam, what are the opportunities for the kind of balance between public equity and private equity in terms of getting that kind of finance towards a co-production film?
So when we get a producer offset, so one thing very interesting about Australia is it's not called a subsidy, it's called a producer offset, which means if Cary is producing a film and you've ticked all the boxes and you qualify, you will get that money from the government as your equity. Now, all of us independent producers have got the option to sell that equity, to keep it, to not take it back because it's not money of our pocket. Which means when I get the producer offset, I can put my investors first in line rather than sharing it with me. And I do that because at the end of the day, we are all filmmakers. We will do anything to make the film complete. So suddenly, so that is one aspect, one very important ingredient. The second ingredient, let's not forget, especially a lot of young filmmakers here, that there is a huge realistic number of Indians who are very rich outside India, who have always wanted to support arts, culture, and films. And films is a very sexy investment for them. And if investing in films is at half the reduced risk, they will give money. And what we do is we put our money where our mouth is. We ask them to start putting in money in development, which is totally refundable. And we have found that most of these equity investors, rather than putting in a $4 million, they would put in $100,000 for development, which is so hard to get. And at the end of that process, when they looked at the star cast, when they get the film, when they're willing to partake with the rest of the money. So these are the couple of ingredients we use, but always the public money or the government grants or now the Indian grants are little, they're the little carrots they dangle. That, you still have 100% equity, so we give them 100% equity till they get their money and the premium back. So that's all what we can do is, make the film really, really an appealing process for them.
As an Australian and also as an NRI Indian, what's some of the challenges you find in terms of Indian filmmakers approaching you as a producer in Australia, in terms of maybe mismatch of expectations around the co-production process, in terms of that might be to do with budgeting or scheduling, etc.?
I think the difference between reality and theory in films is the biggest gap I think all of us deal with. They think, it's working on paper, but you have to look at practicality. Where are you going to get the cash flow from? Where are you going to do that? One of the other things which has happened is the biggest problems we had. With the co-production treaty, I will not lose my Australian grants by hiring a well-known key creative from India. Without the co-production treaty, as an Australian filmmaker of Indian origin, I was forced to select from a limited and very inexperienced pool of key creatives who are of Indian origin. If I've got a Punjabi story in Australia, I need a Punjabi female writer. There are none with a feature project. So, those are the many things, but I think it is up to us as filmmakers, and I'm sure you will realize, and this is a tip for young filmmakers, always set your expectations so that you end up delivering more than what you promised. Because once you lose an investor, it'll be a long while before you will get another one.
I noticed one thing that with, for example, between India and, say, for the example of the UK, quite often the budgets are different. For example, an expectation of a budget might be different from one country to another, the budgeting process. Ala, have you faced that in terms of working with an Indian producer, in terms of how the budgets have stacked up in terms of the kind of first draft of the budgets and how that's developed?
You mean the comparative cost between countries? I mean, it's much more expensive to make a film in the UK, that's for sure. So, I mean, if we'd have shot Sister Midnight fully in the UK, if it was possible, it would have cost way more, a considerable amount more, which is something I'm sort of noticing with meeting projects here. Some, not all, but some comparatively small budgets. What to us seems like a small budget, and they're saying, well, I'd like to come and shoot in the UK as well. It needs a few days in the UK. You think, well, you'd actually need most of your budget to shoot the few days in the UK because it's really expensive. So, considering co-production, it's going to massively increase your budget. But obviously, you could raise money from the UK to pay for that, but then it can only be 40% of the budget from the UK. So that doesn't stack up. You need money from elsewhere to offset that. I should say that by qualifying the film as British through a treaty, you're then also able to access the UK producer's tax credit, or what's it officially called, tax relief, film tax relief. So on all qualifying expenditure in the UK, you can claim back, nets out at about 20% of cost. So that is another benefit of qualifying it as a British film, but only on British expenditure. So you can access private funds without a treaty. That's perfectly possible. It doesn't have to be an official co-production, but you wouldn't be able to claim back the tax credit.
So, but with your Indian producer, you found there was a synergy immediately with developing a budget and scheduling, and there was no cultural difference or...
the budgeting and scheduling, no. I mean, scheduling was totally the same, used the same software. Yeah, that's the company we work with. We're used to working with Netflix and Apple, so...
Great, that's good.
Yeah.
Pan, what's your experience?
I mean, experience, I would say, rather than experience, I would say let's talk about what we can do now in the future, because over the last few years, things have changed quite a lot. And I do believe now that the only way for me, and I believe this is what I would recommend for young filmmakers who want to try and break in, that there has to be a way to stop hiding behind art house film, independent label, nothing. The film is commercial in its nature, and you have to get money back to your investor. And that's one of the reasons I was able to make second film. Sometimes they made more money, sometimes they got their money back, but it must make financial sense at the end of the day. So every time you take out the movie, you have to make sure that you will be against Fast and Furious and Mission Impossible. You will be talking to distributor who are thinking about. So I always think that, okay, where is my film is going to end up? Who's going to pick up, and can they release it? So that's where a lot of questions get answered when you are working on your film, on your budget. That, okay, I'm making a film at a certain budget, but I'll refuse to call it a small film. When I go out, I tell them, this is the film I made. No, it's not a small film. Yeah, you might have a $60 million Fablesman, but you are the distributor who are picking it up. Find smaller way to release it. So I think that we have to embrace the commercial nature of exploitation of cinema. And if we don't exploit that, we cannot incorporate production process. I don't know how to say that, but it has to reflect in how we produce the film, you know.
I mean, one of the things with your films, for example, you've picked up multiple co-production partners, which has ended up as multiple distribution partners. You've actually, because of the film has been funded in each territory, you've actually got a distribution partner, which has been very successful across Europe, for example, with Last Film Show, for example.
Yeah, so in Last Film Show, what we did was that me and my producing partner, Dheer, we went to Cannes market, and in the market, we spoke to about 12 distributors. We had the screenplay, we had the photographs, we had, cast photo, and we said, this is the film we are making. How much will you buy it for? Imagine you make the film and you're going to love it. What is your MG, which is minimum guarantee for your territory? So we had Spain, Germany, few countries, and we made some projection based on that. And then we went to a sales company and say, those 12 people, because they've been doing business with them. Can you call them? They've liked our project and said, this is what they might buy our film for. So we were able to raise equity and minimum guarantee from a sales company to finish our production budget and get into production. And sure enough, we were able to sell those territory, but because of pandemic, they were sold at less price. But then they were able to sell more countries. So we got lucky in a way because our film came out where theatrical release had taken a hit. So when we were finishing the film, we never thought we'll have a 250 screen release in like Italy or 36 run in Japan, or companies like Shochiku Studio will pick up a film, or Medusa in Italy. They were like big distributor, known for picking up very big movies. So I don't know, somehow that helped, but it was a gamble we took, and we were impacted by pandemic like many of us here, but we sort of still survived that obstacle.
I mean, you say you don't like co-productions, but you clearly do enjoy them in terms of money aside, in terms of the actual relationships across different countries. Is something that you, as a filmmaker, all of you do, is you actually build a relationship. And it's, as you say, it's a marriage in terms of, that's very important for filmmakers to know that it's at least a 3-year process to develop a co-production of any film in terms of how do you go about finding your marriage partner?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, some marriages fail, but is it? Yeah, maybe. So you've really got to find the right partners and just like them. I think that is a massive component of a co-production. You just, to me, that involves going to a bar and having a drink with them and having a nice time. If we can do that, then maybe we'll get through these years that we're going to work together.
I have a litmus test. Most of the producers we have worked with, if they do not even mention money in the first couple of dates and want to know more about the film, more about the story, more about what it is, and you can see it in the eyes never lie. So if they're more interested in the creatives rather than the finance, for me, they are my right co-producing partners.
Good to know, good to know. I think we've got time for a few audience questions, if anybody would like to put their hands up. There's a question at the very back.
Thank you very much for all the information, Cary, and thank you for leading a great panel.
Could you speak up a bit, please?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for a great panel, and thank you, Cary, for leading it. I have a production company in Germany, and Alastair, specifically to you, since you have experience with multiple countries with the co-productions, what percentage of a budget should be planned for the legal side? And then number 2, for Shruti, 50%, you said 50% of the cash would be upfront and given to the production company. Do I need to have an Indian bank account that the money goes into, or can the money be transferred into the German bank? And then lastly, how long is the process for budget approval on the Indian side of the co-production?
Alastair, you want to take your question?
My part was first. So the percentage for the legals, there isn't really a percentage, but I mean, to give you an idea, you can quite easily spend £50,000 on legal fees for a complicated co-production.
Yeah, just a general percentage of a budget. If you have $1 million budget, what would your percentage of that to plan for?
I mean, I don't know, like that'd be about maybe 25 to 30 grand, maybe. I mean, it's just because the budget is less, there aren't necessarily fewer legal documents to sort. It becomes an increasing percentage. So you're better off having a higher budget and being able to actually afford the legal fees. So you don't really reduce it by reducing the budget.
So you're saying about 10% then?
No, that would be, I need 10%, no, not 10%, like 3 to 5.
Okay, thank you.
So depending on how you're applying for, sorry, Alastair, were you done?
No, that was it. I thought it was
Okay. So depending on how you're applying for the project, whether if it's a co-production or if you're just not going down the co-production route, either way you're going to have to, you need an Indian partner for that. So an Indian line producer or the Indian co-producer, and it typically, all the finances get routed via him. And in terms of timelines, once you submit your entire financials, it takes about 60 to 90 days for the amount to get dispersed back to you. There will be queries that will come to you if, let's say, if it is not in the set format that we've prescribed for the entire submission process. But once that's clarified, then 90 days is what we keep as the limit. I mean, the sooner you respond, the better it is.
Got it, thank you.
Another question? There's a gentleman right in the middle. In the blue.
I have been hearing sessions for last 4 days. And I would like to know from you, where does children films has a space somewhere to get a special support? Do you think there is an opportunity for children filmmakers? Because I belong to documentary and children films. Do you have any answer for that?
Boss answering your question.
Sir, we're actually in talks to launch a children's film festival very shortly. So let's have a conversation after this panel, and I'm happy to fill you in.
You should, obviously state-funded children's films development fund here in India, obviously, and in the UK and other countries supporting. And Pan's film is obviously not made by children, but it's about children, the last film show. Pan, would you like to say anything about children's films? Or?
I mean, I didn't make a film thinking it's children's film in mind, but certain countries do have, system, and we do also, I think in India, the main question is distribution, It's production of children film might be easy, but how you sort of take it out. And the most important thing in India, I think it should be that the exposure to good cinema should be introduced at very early level. And then I think it would be great because many countries have that in curriculum, that children watch good films, while they are at school. If you look at model in South Korea or Japan or Switzerland, and then they will grow up to, if they develop taste at early age, probably they will want to see something, which is beyond popular cinema.
No.
We'll talk about it in the next panel. There's a person just in the front here, 2 rows back.
Hi, my question is, you're talking about incentives and funding over here. So where can one access this information? Is there like a public platform which is available where one can go and get this information? Is there like a certain way one should access? Because the moment you put a word like film funds on Google, there's a whole plethora of information that is available to actually identify which are the good ones or the bad ones. Like, if you could guide me a bit.
So, my humble suggestion would be, start with the country where your story is connected to. So if it is India, then I'm sure Shruti will answer. But let's say you're working on a story which is related to Australia. It's an Indian story. When you just go into Australian incentives, all film bodies, I'm sure in Australia, at least in UK and Australia, have very extensive, very helpful, very informative websites where you can get all the information you need, whether you're eligible, whether you're not. At least from my experience, Australia and Britain and even India, they're very responsive if you call them, if you email them. So again, going back to what I said in the beginning, do not do a global search on incentive and funds. Find out where your story belongs, and then you start.
But there are also international funds like Upert Bal Fund, for example, where you can get international funding, which isn't country specific. So it is a very complicated area. I think that certain festivals also have a list of funding support, like Cannes, I believe, has it, Toronto. You can actually check that on their websites, for example. So I know those also advice on funding exists.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to answer this question because there is a platform. It's called Online Film Financing, OLFI, which I've created about 10 years ago, and you will find there listed all the funding, all the available funding programs around the world, not only the incentives that you will find everywhere, but the specific program for development, production, post-production. We also provide all the co-production treaties, and we also provide some of the cultural tests that you need to run to analyze whether you qualify or not. But I agree with what you said. You need to set up a financing strategy. You can compare funds and application date on this platform too. And actually, we are now in the process of implementing, all the new Indian landscape. So that might be useful for producers who are interested in shooting in India, with the new state, the new, I would say, national support, but also the different incentives that the states are providing now.
Your name is Ilian Gerard.
Yes, Ilian Gerard, yes.
And I mean, I've used that OLFI fund a number of times.
Okay,
in fact, especially when you're looking at new markets, like we had a story for Mauritius, and you had a great things for Mauritius. So again, where you're going, you can just. There's a guy at the back.
And you're just about to do, I believe, Indian LGBT UK co-production as well, I believe. So thank you for that. We have time for one last question, then we have to wind up. So one last question, please.
Hello. Hi. I think this is an extension of what Anupam was just saying. So I'm a writer-director. I'm writing a story which is set in the US about an Indian character. It's half in Hindi and half in English. So I was trying to figure out what's the way, because I don't think there's a co-production treaty between India and the US. So I was just wondering for this specific case, what would be the way for me to go if I have to try to figure out financing?
First thing would be find a producer who is passionate about your story from America, and preferably one from India. If you just want to write direct, get them to, both of them, to create a fertile ground for you to creatively express your vision. So I would start with a producer out of America first, who loves your story, and then everything else.
Yeah, I'm just going to, I'm hoping all the wooing and the marriages work. That's what we are looking forward to, and we're really looking forward to bigger projects coming our way. About the funds, you can look on the ffo.r website. It has all the updated incentives, so you can check that out as well.
Got it, thank you.
And just a final word, of course, we have co-production between all the countries on the panel as well. So if you're doing a co-production, you could do it with India, you could do it with the UK, you could do it with Australia. So why just stick to two countries when there are multiple opportunities? And also that leads into multiple possibilities around distribution of films, support marketing, for example, another initiative you have in India.
Yes, the Film Promotion Fund.
Yes. Would you want to just briefly finish on that one?
So the Film Promotion Fund is, we are offering financial support in terms of marketing for films that actually get selected to film festivals, so shortlisted. So there are different funds set up, for instance, in Busan or, the Oscars, for instance, or whichever film, Sundance. There's a whole list of festivals that are available. There's funds kept aside for each of those. So let's say your film gets shortlisted and, goes to the next round, then you're eligible to apply for that. And that's another big way that we are supporting Indian filmmakers, because, marketing is a big part of really getting your film out. Again, we have a few projects that are under process where the files are, done processing, just dispersal is pending on those. So do apply for that as well.
So just remains to thank the speakers for being here today.
Thank you.
Obviously, if you'd like to talk to them outside, I'm sure they'd be happy to have a chat as well. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're starting our next session in 2 minutes. Also, a reminder, no recording of any sort of the next session. This is highly, highly secure information, so we will not have any video cameras recording this session, and we ask you to do the same. So please oblige with that. See you in literally 2 minutes for Wendy Burnfield.